Oishi closes $150 million Series C for farm expansion. Oishi's new capital targets robot density in its Pennsylvania site first. That timing lines up with peak season contracts for premium retailers who have already signaled they will drop suppliers unable to guarantee year-round volume. Traditional berry growers now face a 6-month window to match controlled environment consistency or cede shelf space permanently. The real pressure falls on cold chain logistics partners who must reconfigure routes around fewer, larger indoor hubs. LinkedIn cuts 5% of workforce in reorg. The reorg keeps the sales organization intact while trimming content moderation and sales support roles. Enterprise customers relying on LinkedIn's recruiter APIs now confront longer response times unless the remaining team accelerates automation of lead scoring. Microsoft gains a ready-made excuse to fold more LinkedIn functions into Azure sales quotas within the next fiscal year. Watch for smaller HR software vendors to gain ground on mid-market deals that LinkedIn previously dominated through bundled subscriptions. Takeda cuts 4,500 jobs in global transformation. Net headcount barely moves once the 2,200 open roles fill, yet the geography of cuts skews heavily toward Japan and Europe research sites. Contract manufacturing partners should prepare for Takeda to demand volume-based pricing tiers that favor larger batches over the next 2 quarters. Smaller biotech firms lose a reliable customer for early-stage process development work. The shift accelerates Takeda's reliance on external discovery platforms, compressing timelines for any partner still negotiating milestone payments. UMC launches 14nm FinFET for display drivers. Display driver margins have stayed flat for 3 years despite node shrinks elsewhere. UMC's 14nm high-voltage process finally gives panel makers a path to cut power draw by roughly 15% without redesigning their backplanes. Samsung and TSMC must now decide whether to match the embedded FinFET offering or concede the mid-range monitor and TV segment by the second half of next year. Inventory builds at those foundries will likely slow once design wins migrate. IQM files F4 for Nasdaq listing at $1.8 billion value. The SPAC structure caps immediate cash but introduces a redemption overhang that could trim effective proceeds by 30% or more. IQM needs a commercial foundry agreement signed before the merger closes, or the public float risks pricing the shares below the $1.8 billion headline. Existing European quantum hardware suppliers gain breathing room to court the same government contracts IQM had targeted. Any delay beyond 9 months hands the advantage to superconducting competitors already public. Tecamet acquires Orchid for global manufacturing. Contract manufacturers outside the new platform face immediate pressure on capacity bookings as Tecamet folds in Orchid's sites. Device makers now have fewer options for scaling production without locking in multi-year volumes up front. This forces smaller orthopedic firms to either accept higher minimum orders or accelerate in-house lines by next year. Zimmer Biomet will likely consolidate suppliers faster once the entity quotes complete programs across 4 continents. This changes bidding dynamics for high-volume runs starting in 2027. Verizon cuts several hundred roles in restructure. Headcount reductions this size rarely move the needle on overall OPEX, but they target the network planning groups that set 2026 deployment targets. Enterprise customers expecting custom 5G network slices may see feature rollouts slip by 2 quarters. This opens the door for AT&T to lock in more large contracts before Verizon recovers its roadmap pace. Legacy wireline support teams stay intact while wireless innovation slows. Watch the enterprise sales win rates shift in the second half. Fidelity cuts 800 tech jobs in rebuild. The technology and product delivery teams absorb nearly all the cuts, which will slow development cycles on new wealth management interfaces and related tools. Schwab and other rivals can now pull ahead on mobile app features without matching Fidelity's prior pace. Client onboarding tools and planning calculators will see fewer updates through the end of next year. Advisors relying on those tools face longer wait times for requested enhancements. Fidelity's advisor network loses ground on responsiveness by early 2027. Breeze Acquisition 2 prices $125 million SPAC IPO. SPAC vehicles this size have struggled to close deals recently, yet the sector focus on robotics and advanced manufacturing points to specific undervalued targets in supply chains. Investors will watch for an acquisition in precision components within 9 months. Traditional PE firms active in hardware may find themselves bidding against this vehicle on the same assets. The structure favors quick closes over lengthy due diligence typical in those industries. This timeline pressures sellers to accept terms faster than in prior cycles. Quantinuum files for Nasdaq IPO. The filing arrives as quantum hardware moves from lab to pilot lines, forcing public market investors to price in manufacturing yields that remain unproven at scale. IonQ and Rigetti must now justify their valuations against the direct peer with clearer commercial milestones. Office expansion signals hiring is already underway for those production ramps. Smaller quantum startups lose negotiating power with suppliers as a result. Expect more consolidation talks among the remaining players before year-end. Applied Aerospace files NYSE IPO with 25% growth. Defense suppliers rarely disclose revenue spikes this sharp right before going public. The 24.8% figure points to fresh contracts in avionics rather than legacy parts. Once listed, Applied Aerospace can tap public markets for expansion capital without dilution pressure from late-stage VCs. Expect them to target acquisitions in thermal management systems by early 2027. That move would directly challenge incumbents holding long-term NASA subcontracts. Smaller players in the supply chain now face a better capitalized rival bidding on the same programs. Unitree unveils $650K half-ton manned mech suit. A manned mechanical suit at half a ton forces manufacturers to rethink factory floor load ratings before any deployment. Unitree's pricing lands it between heavy construction equipment and specialized robotics fleets. Shipyard operators testing the GD-01 will discover maintenance cycles that eat into the productivity gains. Early orders will likely come from defense logistics rather than commercial construction. That reality pushes labor unions to negotiate new safety protocols around powered exoskeletons within the next 18 months. Legacy equipment makers must now decide whether to partner or compete on service contracts. Zomato founder raises $54 million for wearables startup. Goyle's logistics track record points to Temple prioritizing enterprise biometric integration over direct consumer sales. The valuation already bakes in deals that prior wearables never closed at scale. Corporate wellness programs become the immediate battleground. This forces a faster shift away from hardware margins toward recurring software revenue. Garmin and similar device makers must accelerate their own data platform partnerships or risk losing those accounts. The real test arrives when pilots move to full fleet deployments next year. Saga Robotics deploys UVC bots on 600 acres. Saga's Thorvald deployment at Castoro Cellars shows UVC treatment scaling beyond small greenhouse tests. Organic wine producers gain a concrete alternative to copper-based sprays that regulators keep tightening. Conventional growers will now face pressure from buyers to adopt similar, non-chemical methods within 2 growing seasons. Equipment financing arms at John Deere must develop new lease structures for these specialized robots or cede the organic segment entirely. Expect certification requirements to evolve as more vineyards report yield consistency matching sprayed fields. Ethero raises $8.4 million seed for space computers. Orbital hardware startups rarely raise at this stage with a clear path to flight hardware. Ethero's seed round targets edge processing that reduces downlink bandwidth costs for constellation operators. Satellite builders using these systems will shorten data latency enough to support real-time logistics tracking in low Earth orbit. That capability pressures existing ground station networks to upgrade their processing handoff agreements before 2027. Otherwise, they lose the newest fleet contracts to integrated compute providers. Operators locked into legacy architectures face margin compression once competitors demonstrate the bandwidth savings. Bayer launches the Watch 2026 pest monitoring. Corn rootworm pressure maps that update weekly change the timing of every spray decision. Most Midwest growers still default to calendar-based treatments that waste product. Bayer's program captures that timing data at field level and routes it straight to the sprayer cab. The second-order effect hits independent agronomists first. Their scouting contracts lose value once the app dictates exactly when to hit the field. Watch for deer to counter with its own pest layer before 2027 planting. Nuvation Bio shifts cancer drug production to US. Process transfers like this usually take 18 months. Finishing ahead of schedule shows Thermo Fisher cleared dedicated capacity fast. Smaller oncology developers now choose between premium US slots and extended European timelines. Contract manufacturers still running Asian lines lose the formulation work that used to follow clinical supply packages. 2 Indian CMOs will announce US sites inside the next 6 months to keep oncology bids alive or watch their share of early-stage trials shrink. Envision closes $55 million Series B quantum round. Envision's new capital buys fab time rather than research headcount. The round's term sheet reportedly gives one cloud provider first rights to test the quantum classical interface in production workloads. That forces every other hyperscaler to accelerate its own quantum partnerships or risk falling behind on hybrid benchmarks by late 2026. Watch the next 3 term sheets out of IonQ and Rigetti. They will carry similar compute reservations or lose enterprise pilots to the front of the line. Humacyte cuts 25% workforce in commercial reset. Symvess still needs hospital approvals and a sales force experienced enough to navigate vascular graft committees inside major systems. Cutting the team this early means the launch window narrows to centers already in the pilot network and delays broader adoption by a full year. Established players like Gore and Bard pick up the accounts Humacyte can no longer cover, locking in formulary position before first commercial shipment. Gore's vascular sales reps are already booking lunch and learns at those same accounts this quarter. Luna Robotics raises €1.08 million for defense vision. 1.08 million is seed money for drone vision hardware that already meets NATO STANAG specs. The round lets Luna ship the first 50 units to 2 undisclosed European defense primes before year-end and lock in follow-on integration work. Those primes now accelerate their own sensor fusion programs or risk missing the next tender cycle that explicitly calls for plug-and-play drone payloads. Smaller tactical drone makers without similar vision stacks lose bids that bundle sensing with the airframe on upcoming programs.